Hello, Matthew. How you doing today?
I am fantastic. I am fantastic. I've been looking forward to this call for a while now, so looking forward to seeing what we get into this evening.
That's awesome. Okay, today I have Matthew Devine with me today from Toronto,
Canada,
Ontario.
Ontario, Canada.
Okay, Canada. All right. He's a leadership career coach, helping introverted engineering managers find direction, and meaning in their careers. And you specifically said INTJ, which is specifically mastermind.
That's
All right.
the title for the INTJ is the mastermind. Although I wouldn't ever use that word to describe myself. There are definitely blind spots. So, uh, yeah, for those of you who are familiar with the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs type system, INTJ is part of that personality typing system. Basically, it's an introverted thinking sort of person.
Awesome. So Matthew, I just wanted to say that this being April, we are talking about navigating uncertainty, and the pillar specifically is performance sustaining strategies. And the message today is this month is about learn how to lead when the path is unclear and the stakes are high. Okay, I'm sure you have a lot to say
When,
about
when are the stakes not high when you're in a leadership role? If we're being honest, there's always something important, right? Whether or not we're talking like the stakes of the organization, like whatever you're working on, the actual job itself, or it's the people themselves. You know, you as a manager have accountability for the people that you lead. Those are important stakes to be taking into consideration. You can't take that lightly. I don't take that lightly. I don't think you should take that lightly as a leader. So I like this topic because I think it speaks to a regular challenge for managers dealing with uncertainty, one, but also the fact that you don't have necessarily a lot of time or flexibility in order to come to the best decisions, but you still need to act, you still need to make decisions, you still need to move forward.
Okay, so I take it from your earlier statement that you too are INTJ.
That's the my personality type is an INTJ, which is an introverted type. So I'm definitely an introvert, but it means basically that how I approach thinking about the world is slightly different than other types, but it's definitely um, a very contemplative type of introvert.
And what I was reading about it was is the rationals. It's actually four different types of rationals. Now, are you specifically seeking out um, INTJ in engineering managers?
Oh, no, no, no. That was more a description about who I am. When it comes to engineers, engineers come in all flavors. Like there's a lot, I work with a lot of introverted engineers, but they're extroverted engineers as well who are similarly challenged in their career and they get stuck. So I include that little tag just simply as a notification for people who are familiar with the Myers-Briggs system to engage me with that question. So I regularly get people commenting on that. Um,
Cool. That's cool because I happen to be an INFJ, which is the counselor, and I am
right.
also an introvert.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me,
INTJs and INFJs, they work really well together. I've got a few friends who are INFJs.
cool. So tell me how important it is for people to know who they are, as far as Myers Briggs or whatever in
Well,
general.
yeah, and my familiarity is on Myers-Briggs, but there's all sorts of different other personality types. The advantage about knowing who you are is that you understand there's a couple of things. You understand what your preferences are. Like we know we like things and don't like things, but to really own that, to really be able to appreciate, hey, this is how I show up. For me as an introvert, I need time to think about things, to contemplate, to connect the dots in my own head. I know I need that time in order to do my best work. And appreciating those characteristics about myself allow me to approach my problem solving in a very particular way. I pull myself away from the stress of whatever the job is to ensure that I've got time to process, think, and then come back, re-engage with the right ideas. So understanding your type and whatever personality model is a good place to get some clues about who you are. But it's also understanding how you show up to other people, because we have our own ideas about how we approach our own preferences about the world, but other people see us in a way that we don't see ourselves. So understanding our impact on the group. Like when I first was promoted as a manager, I didn't realize I was very forceful and very uh, passionate about how I expressed ideas to my group. And I'm a nice guy. My team recognized that, but they also were like, "You're a little intense sometimes, Matthew. You need to back it off." And so learning about how you show up, how other people perceive you, is an important piece to understand, to know, is that something you need to dial back, which was my case? Or is it something that you can dial up? Like, are there times where you need to dial up to 11 because that's what's needed in this situation? And so understanding both how you are internally, what are your preferences, what are your strengths, and getting clear on that and owning that. And by the corollary, owning what you're not good at, what you don't like, but also then understanding and getting feedback about how you show up to others allows you the ability to then start making an impact, because then you can use the right communication, like way of communicating. Sometimes you need to be quieter, more thoughtful, softer spoken, because that's what's needed in this situation. But other times you need to be loud. You need to be direct. You need to be sharp. You need to be clear in order to get your team to move to the next step, to the next thing. But knowing that you have that range and what that range feels like and looks like is really important when it comes to understand yourself. That's a fairly long answer. Does that capture some ideas for you?
Absolutely. Now, looking at you, Matthew, I would not think that you were an introvert. I would think you were an extrovert.
And that is a stereotype about introverts. People think about introverts as being, oh, they're shy, they don't talk to anyone, they hide in the corner. And the reality is that that's not the case. I can be as dynamic here because I'm comfortable. We're a one-on-one conversation. And you and I can easily carry on a conversation, probably for hours if we don't have time today, but we could carry on a conversation for hours. That's
Right.
not being shy. That's not being quiet.
Absolutely.
And I've also learned that understanding that I'm an introvert, I understand what that actually means. Like, what does that mean from, how do I manage my own resources? How do I manage my own energy level? But to know when I can show up with energy, how I can stand up at the front of the room and deliver presentations, deliver training, speak in front of a boardroom, but know that, okay, in order to do that with confidence, with the energy that you're seeing here, that also requires me to then go away and go into a dark room, a quiet space to, process and think and recover and so forth. Like, that's an important dimension of being an introvert. But it doesn't prevent me from showing up with energy. People get confused by that. They think I'm an extrovert. That's not the case at all. I am most certainly somebody who needs to have his alone time.
All right. So tell me this, you wouldn't have any problem being in a room with 10,000 people and speaking on stage?
Depends on what I'm doing in said room. But, like, could I go to a concert, for instance, and be in a crowd of thousands of people? Sure.
Okay.
We can all enjoy the music. We can all enjoy the performance. It's great. is the expectation that in that room of 10,000 people that I now need to spend the next 4 days meeting and interacting and carrying on parties with all of them. That would be exhausting. So it depends on the role that I would be serving in that space. Could I go up on stage and speak in front of 10,000 people? That would be an impressive. I would definitely be intimidated by that. But could I do it? Yes, I could do it. Knowing that once that I step off that stage, I am getting out into quiet, cold air, cool air, all by myself to decompress from that space, because that would be a very intense experience. And that's an important piece that introverts need to navigate, because if they don't know that about themselves, that they need to take that step back to process and to cool down and recover, they're just going to exhaust themselves. They're going to stress themselves out. They're not going to be happy.
Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So tell me now, since you've been working with these what made you, first of all, what made you decide to work with engineer managers?
My background is mostly like I've studied human resources, change management training. I'm coming from that side of the space. I'm a leadership coach. But in my corporate experience, most of my career has been in companies that work with engineers. So multiple utilities. So I've worked with, engineering co-op students, engineering new grads, engineering junior engineers, engineering managers, engineering directors across all sorts of different projects for the bulk of my career. I've spoke to hundreds of engineering employees and managers throughout my career. I've spoken to thousands of candidates applying to engineering jobs. I have worked with many engineers. I like them. They are very, very smart, hardworking people, and they also like to think inside this little box. They're really good with that. And the thing that I can bring to them is being able to help them see outside that box, consider possibilities that they may not normally consider. Because a lot of what makes engineers really good at their jobs is this hyper focus on structure, process, procedure. These are all great skills that engineers need. But when it comes to developing themselves, or imagining their career outside of the confines, they have difficulty, because it's hard for them to look sideways, because they're very linear in their approach to thinking, which is extremely important, extremely needed in their job. But it's that sideways, thinking outside the box perspective that can be challenging for some engineers. And that's what I bring, is that perspective. And that's why I work with them. And the introverted piece is because I'm coming from an introverted background. I can speak to that. And I know there's a lot of really good engineers who are introverts who find themselves in manager roles, but then don't know what they need to do with themselves in that role. They can talk engineering, but outside of that, it becomes a bigger challenge, and they are stressed by that.
I can say from my work with the Corps of Engineers, okay, for 39 years, the majority of engineers that I work with were introverts, okay? And as you said,
not surprising.
They are inside of this box, and they are genius at what they do, okay? And so me, as a technician, and looking at the bigger picture, working with them, we were able to work together extremely well, with what they did and what I did, and we come together. Mm-hmm. Oh man, we were able to keep the projects on time, on budget, and of high quality. Okay, right. Those the three things are very important in construction, as we know. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And that makes complete sense, right? Because you're bringing in a balanced perspective and that complements. And I think that, the really good engineers realize that they also benefit when they have outside perspectives to draw their attention to things that they just haven't had a chance to see before, or they haven't thought about before, or they haven't had any reason to learn about this other piece. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's this other dimension, or there's this other larger context, or as you said, look at the bigger picture. And they're like, okay, I get it. Thank you. That helps. All right, now we can work together to figure out how do we solve this little in the box problem, but in the larger context.
Because as I try to instill, especially in the younger engineers, that there is black and white, okay, but there are shades of gray, and we need to take these things in consideration. Okay, is it worth doing this change, or can we just do something else instead, save time and money? Let's look at the bigger picture and see what's the best, between cost and it's a ratio, the cost and the cost and some
Well,
benefit.
there's usually I forget the exact maxim, but it's like you can choose, it to be done cost efficiently, you can have good quality, or you can have it done in a timely fashion. Pick two of those three. And you need to have a compromise, right? You need to find
Compromise.
that balance
It is.
between
It
these
really
things in
is.
order to deliver the project in the right way that best meets those criteria.
Yeah. The best needs for the client and overall um, needs of all stakeholders.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
like your introduction of that gray, and that, engineers often will want to default to black and white because it's a very clear yes, no, up, down, the math works. But
Absolutely.
the real world has more gray in it. And I think especially when people move into, frontline manager roles, or they start moving up in the organization, they're taking on those supervisory roles, the kinds of challenges. And we started off with talking about uncertainty and how do we deal with uncertainty in high stakes and situations. It's that when they get to that place where you're in a leadership role, there's much more gray in your world, because you're no longer dealing with just, here's one engineering thing that has to fit this other engineering thing. Now you need to have the humans that are dealing with their kids who are sick, or you're having to deal with some other, political aspect of the organization, where you're dealing with personalities of people that are not involved in the project but have influence on what's happening. These are the
Absolutely.
sorts of gray dimensions that you now need to be navigating, even though as much as you'd like to focus on the black and white, it becomes a lot more challenging in those situations.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. Now, what when you're dealing with these challenges and roadblocks, what do you find in common with the engineering managers when you're dealing with uncertainty and what we're talking about?
Well, one of the challenges is you tend to get resistance from, trying to find the right, quote unquote, right, correct answer. There's usually it has to be done this way, and there's a rigidity around things have to be a certain way. So that's challenge number one, is being willing to recognize there are certain things that need to have some flexibility. Now, I want to be clear for the engineers who are listening to this, we're not talking about compromising on safety. We're not talking about compromising on, making things dangerous at all. But we're talking about there are going to be certain things where you need to make some flexibility because of these other considerations. And these other considerations have value. So part of the challenge is, how do we allow ourselves to accept that there are going to be certain things that, don't make logical sense, but make sense for the situation we're in. For instance, if the boss, for whatever random reason, wants to do things a different way, or is thinking about a project in a certain way, well, maybe sometimes you need to make things adjusted a different way, even though the best possible logical solution is to do it this other way. So recognizing which has greater weight in this situation. But I
Let
think
me ask
another
you this.
piece that's important is to also experiment. Sometimes there is going to be opportunity to try different things, and to be
Right.
willing to be like, okay, we've got our ideal situation. We know that this represents the best logical, perfect everything. Well, let's try something different. What if we move this thing over to the other side instead? What changes there? What is allowed? What can we do that? How does that change all of what we're trying to do? And allow that experimentation to get outside of the box that we can get ourselves in as engineering managers, locked into that logical box. Experimenting with even just simply as a thought experiment can bring new ideas and open up flexibility to find a better solution.
I totally agree with that. Are you seeing psychological safety evident in these
Mm.
organizations to allow for that to happen, for individuals to be able to challenge the status quo per se?
It's a really interesting idea around psychological safety. Um, I think on some level, engineers are good at arguing about engineering stuff. They can say, well, the math over here is great. Oh yeah, well, this math is different. Okay. They can argue numbers all day and they are happy doing that. That's their thing. But the psychological safety comes into, are the people that they work with reliable? Are they going to be showing up, you know, with I was going to say energy, but are they going to be showing up angry and abusive and bullying at work? Because you may have the right knowledge, but if you are feeling threatened and you're being talked over, um, and for instance, some of the women that I work with, that's one of their challenges is trying to even find a voice in a room full of men. That can be a place where they may not feel psychologically safe in order to express their ideas and have those ideas treated seriously and not be attacked for even just speaking in front of a group of people.
I am
That is
glad,
definitely a real world challenge.
Matthew, I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of the reasons why I retired, is because
Hmm.
I felt unsafe. And that's why I brought that up working in an engineering environment. The majority of uh, the employees, I would say 90% of the people where I worked, 98% were men. And maybe it was 99 and
It's
2%
going to
women.
be high.
And
Let's be
2%
honest, it's going to be high.
Yeah, and 2% women. And as far as minorities, maybe less than 1%. Okay, me and someone else. So that's the reality. That's what I want to ask you. So, what do you think that engineering managers are wanting to do to try to alleviate this psychological safety in the workplace, which will increase creativity and productivity?
I think part of it comes down to awareness, and that it starts from, if you're an engineer and you do good engineering work, that may be rewarded by you getting promoted into a manager level role, which means you're in a position where you're now having a team of people reporting into you. And in that engineering manager role, you can still be talking engineering stuff all day and getting the work done. But it's not an environment where you are learning the proper leadership skills, the kinds of skills that are going to be necessary to either move up in the organization or ultimately be successful in your career. If you're not learning things like communication skills, listening skills, empathy, uh, but also even just being more
Emotional intelligence.
strategic. And the emotional intelligence is an important piece of this. And it doesn't mean that you need to suddenly become a workplace psychologist and, dissecting or diagnosing people's emotional problems, but you need to be aware that humans are working for you, not machines. And they are going to have times where they're not able to bring their full self to work. They've got their own stress in their life, and having some flexibility to recognize when is it time to say, hey, this person needs a bit more time, or they need to have a bit more encouragement, because you can hit them over the head with logical details, but if what they need is just to be told it's okay, you're going to be fine, we're going to get through this, and they just need that support, that may go a lot farther than, you know, coming up with a better logical argument as to why they should be working more. Um,
You're absolutely correct. So, I'm not sure. These are uncertain times right now. So, I mean, I'm not sure. How are they feeling? Are they feeling the stress of all of these things? Because all of that falls on their heads. The engineer,
the managers or the individuals?
engineer managers, a lot of this
Yeah.
falls on them. They are the vehicle of they're getting all this stuff from management, and management telling them you got to do this, and then they got their employees here. So
It's an
sometimes it's two different messages. Okay.
it's an incredibly challenging role. The the most important people in a person's life are they're going to be their family, their loved ones. But after that, the next most important person to somebody is their boss, their immediate boss at work. That's the person they're going to be thinking about and engaged with as far as like, how is this person thinking about me? Am I doing a good job? My boss told me this today, and now that's all I can think of. And that works both ways, both negative and positive. And so the manager is in this critical role where they have almost an outsized influence on the individual. And it's something they need to be responsible for, to realize that when they provide direction and when they provide instruction and when they provide guidance, that's going to land differently depending on how they do it. If they approach their employees as though these are just pawns on a chessboard or just pieces of machinery that just need to keep working until they break down, that's not going to work. But if they're approaching employees with a sense of, all right, these are humans, and they're going to have their own feelings, they're going to have needs, they're going to be upset, and it's not about coddling them. You can still be, working towards high standards and working in chaotic situations, but recognizing that you can communicate a sense of trust and reassurance that you're there to support them to succeed, that you're going to make sure that you are getting obstacles out of their way that are holding them back, that are causing them stress. And as a manager, are you taking on the stress of the employees? Of course you are. Of course you are. Of course, if you are in tune and you value what your employees are doing, you're going to be seeing that. You're going to be seeing them upset. You're going to be seeing them stressed. And you have a role, an opportunity to give them a chance to have some breath, have a chance to collect themselves and solve the problem the best way they can. And if you are in that manager role and you're stressed, hopefully your boss is providing you with the support you need, because you're their employee. They need to be providing that for you as well. And that's not always the case in many environments. And I'm sorry that you experienced something similar in your workplace.
I'm sure that I'm not alone, and the thing of it is that we must be aware, and we need to know how to handle these situations in the best way possible for ourselves first. Okay. Because
and I think awareness it happens at both levels. I think the
absolutely.
employee needs to be aware when they're in a position where they need something, or they need more support, or things aren't working. They need to be able to have that awareness and communicate that. And the manager needs to be aware that their employees are going to have needs as well, and they're going to have challenges and concerns, and they need to be curious about those. And they need to be asking the questions about, what do you need? What's in your way? How can I help?
Absolutely. And that's what should happen. But that's not always the case.
No.
And such is life. Okay.
I reject that, such as life, because that suggests that we don't have any agency. We just have to accept that there may be some difficult situations. If there is a place where you have bad management, there needs to be better management there. Because when you have a bad manager who's bullying their employees, those employees are not engaged, which means they're not going to be as productive. The turnover is going to be higher. You're going to have higher safety incidents. in those environments where you have a poor manager. That's not good for business. It's not good for the bottom line, and it's certainly not good for the people involved.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Okay. So I'm not sure how we are going to be able to resolve that, only by working with the individuals, okay, working with the team and working with the organization. We have a responsibility to change people's mindset, through asking powerful questions, through coaching, through mentoring, and if necessary, through therapy, because a lot of
I
these
would also add
systemic.
training to that as well. How many people get promoted into a leadership role and never receive any sort of leadership training? Um,
Absolutely.
and so
Absolutely.
they're solving a leadership problem with skills that are appropriate when you're a individual contributor, when you're a frontline worker or frontline engineer. Those are not the right tools for that job. So you're right, having all these things to support individuals, and you want to make sure that you give them the opportunity to do the right thing as well.
And to give them the tools they need to succeed, not to fail.
Exactly, exactly.
Absolutely. Matthew, this has been an amazing conversation today. Is there anything that you, um, lessons that you've learned from your journey that you would like to share?
I think there's a couple of things I'd probably mention. I think the first is a we already touched on it, is that self-awareness. Is that taking the time to recognize that you don't know everything. No one does, but is to acknowledge that you yourself don't know everything. And there's an opportunity to be curious, to allow yourself to be open to what are the best people, what are the best managers doing, and learn from them. Open your mind to how to communicate more effectively. So there is that self-awareness to drive curiosity. And I
Absolutely.
think to tie back to what we said before, my background, I'm an introvert, is to also recognize if you are an introvert, that comes with its own characteristics of how you show up, where your strengths are, but also what do you need to take care of yourself in order to bring those strengths into an environment that is often built for extroverts. So those are the
Absolutely.
two things that I would say is self-awareness to lead to curiosity. And if you're an introvert, recognize that you have solid strengths, but know that there are things you need to be doing to take care of yourself.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. Matthew, thank you so much for coming today. We were talking about navigating uncertainty, and in these times, we have to stay flexible and adaptable, and we need to definitely stay aware of what's happening around us. Thank you so much. And,
Thank you for this opportunity. It's been wonderful talking to you.
and it's been a pleasure as well. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.